If you approach women like this, then you'll end up having more dating success than you have time for.
Oh, just want to say I think you are absolutely beautiful. I'm sure you get that all the time. You kind of look like a young Cersei Lannister, but less evil.
Less evil, thank you.
Yeah.
Probably more evil, but
Get a drink between now and then?
yeah, why not?
All right, I'll hit you up.
But if you're like 90% of guys, you're going to approach them more like this.
Hi, I saw you walking by, and I wanted to say that I think you're really cute. How's it going? Hey, how's it going? Good. You from here?
No, visiting.
Visiting?
Yeah.
From where?
San Diego.
Oh, nice. Oof. Hi. Sorry to interrupt, but I like you.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay.
Now, in the second clip, I intentionally am demonstrating, and I know some other YouTubers will probably cherry pick that clip and react to it and say that I'm terrible, but whatever. It shows a really cool point, right? It shows that when you half-ass your approach, when you are not fully committed, it goes much, much worse. Now, look, there are times when you can have an approach like that, and maybe you are the girl's vision of Adonis, and maybe she still likes you, right? There will be the rare occasion. And there will be plenty of times when you approach like the first one, where you do commit, and your intent is strong, and they still reject you. But sadly, most guys who even try this whole cold approach thing, they never approach like the first one. They never get past the point in their mind where their anxiety and their fear of rejection, their ego is low enough, where they're calm enough, where they're present enough that they can even do a committed approach. And so it's very easy to then turn black pill or start turning red pill and to say, oh, well, it's because, you know, I'm not jacked enough. It's because my body fat's 16%. When I get down to 12%, they'll all like me, right? Or if you're not 5'9", if you're not 5'11", you'll die a virgin, which that one's so dumb because there's been scientific studies showing that height and number of sexual partners barely have a correlation. It's there, but it's not nearly as strong as you would think. But anyway, that's besides the point. The point is it can feel like cold approach doesn't work, or at least you're not good enough in some way, inherently, to make it work, because all of your approaches look like that second clip. You know, I've had nights where, it doesn't happen much now, but back in the day, it was all the time where I would have nights, sometimes almost every girl would reject me. And then other nights, almost every girl would love me. And at first it seemed random, but eventually the pattern became more and more clear that when I had strong and positive intent versus when I had weak or negative intent, the reactions were completely different. Like, it's not even close. And so it really shows that game, right? That your game, your charisma, your personality does make a difference. Because I've not only seen this with myself, but with hundreds of clients. In fact, funny enough, it's usually the better looking clients that struggle more because they have a bigger ego about having to approach women. Because they see themselves as good looking. They're like, I'm 6'2", I make good money, whatever, I'm ripped, so I shouldn't have to lower myself to chase them, to put in energy. And funny enough, a lot of times they actually get rejected more than the average or even somewhat below average guy who genuinely tries, right? Who has no ego about it and is willing to put himself out there with positive intent. So when your energy or vibe or whatever you want to call it is good, and you approach in a way that is committed, not half-assed, you will have, you know, it's like 5 or 10x the success rate, right? It's a huge difference. And here's the hard part. Here's the bitter pill that you have to swallow. There's a reason most guys never get there. There's a reason they get stuck in these meandering, half-assed, weak approaches. And it's because to get to the good approaches, you have to go through some crappy approaches. That is how you get there, because the principle that makes your approaches either weak or strong, weak intent or good intent, the most important thing is to put it into nerd speak, to put it into scientific terms, is whether or not you're in a flow state. And so if you don't know, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi was a very influential psychologist who coined the term flow state and came up with it based on tons of research that's been proven to be very real and very powerful, right? So when someone's in a flow state, their productivity can be 5 times as high. They are more charismatic. They are less stressed. Time flies by. They have more fun. They're more effective in every single way, right? It's almost like taking the Limitless pill from, I guess the movie was called Limitless. But it's almost like taking that pill, and normally we're not in that state. And when it comes to socializing, if you're not in that state, it means there's this inner Woody Allen, which, if you don't know, is a very neurotic, self-defeating character, right? That is saying, you're not good enough, you're gonna fail, she's just gonna reject you, she probably has a boyfriend, she looks bitchy, she looks dumb, she looks too smart, it's telling you all these excuses, right? And you're choppy, and you don't fully commit. Even if you can get yourself to approach, it's gonna be like a half step, right? When you're in that mode, when you're not in a flow state. And if you do talk to a girl, you're not gonna be clever, you're not gonna easily think of things to say, you're not gonna be at your best. And that's just the reality, right? And most people, most men, are always in that state. And the way to get out of it is something few people ever do. What flow psychology, what scientific research has shown is the most important thing for getting into a flow state is doing something that's 10% out of your comfort zone. So 10% too challenging for you, basically, right? Where you're pushing yourself. And so if you've barely ever approached women, and that's most people watching this, right? They've maybe done a few here and there. 10% out of your comfort zone really is going to the venue and like trying to say hi to people, saying, I like your shirt, or going for high fives, right? That's an easy one. And it might feel cheesy, it might feel lame, and maybe on some level it kind of is, but it's 1,000 times better than doing nothing, and that's what gets you towards a flow state. Because if you feel resistance to just saying hi or going for the high five, if you feel like a little bit of a knot in your stomach, that means it's moving you towards flow. That's how you know, right? That's the sign to look out for. And so at first, it's just going around a venue where there are women to talk to, and then it's just actually trying to say something. Then it's maybe asking a question, which could be as simple as, do you know any good restaurants nearby, right? Just a very innocuous, easy to ask question. Or are there any other good bars in the area? Something like that. That could be the next level. Then it's approaching and keeping a conversation going, right? Like keeping it going for at least 30 seconds. Then showing your intent, right? Then saying, actually, I wanted to say I think you're really cute, or whatever, right? Or just doing a direct opener where you're actually, putting your ego on the line and making it clear, I am hitting on you. And then when you do that a handful of times, you'll start to realize on an emotional level, it wasn't nearly as big of a deal as you thought it was. And so you'll move more and more towards a flow state, or to what's sometimes called the indifference threshold, where on an emotional level, you don't care about rejection, where it doesn't bother you anymore. And the reality is, almost every guy, unless you're a sociopath or something like that, it does bother you naturally. But you can get over that fear, and once that fear is gone, it's like this monkey is off your shoulders. Because now when you approach, you can do it committed. Now you mean it. Now you're unafraid to put yourself out there, to put your ego on the line in a way where you might actually get rejected. But also you might actually get the yes, because you weren't doing the approach in a way where they felt your indecisiveness, they felt that it was uncertain, and they just kind of naturally want to reject you when you do that. So then you start getting successes, and then your belief will start to change, right? Then your identity that I'm a guy that girls just reject, or I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, not tall enough, whatever, that starts to change, where you start to realize, you start to get proof, well, actually, maybe some girls reject me, but other ones really like me. Other ones find me attractive. I just got 3 makeouts, or I got a date with a girl, or I took a girl home, or whatever. You start getting evidence that proves the new belief, the new mindset that you want to have. And then it gets easier and easier each time you do it to do those committed approaches, right? To go out and approach in a way where you start getting positive results. But, and here's the part that people don't want to stomach, it's the part that people in their marketing videos, you know, when they're trying to sell a cologne or whatever, they don't want to mention, right? It's the part that dating advice avoids like the plague, because I'm telling you, you're going to have to face rejection. I'm telling you, you're going to have some awkward interactions. I'm telling you something that on a certain level you don't want to hear, because it makes things not seem as easy as possible. You have to get out of your comfort zone and do things that on a certain level you won't want to do. But each time you do it, it gets a little bit easier. It starts to be less stressful and more exciting, right? Anxiety turns into excitement, just like, you know, snowboarders or people who go surfing on huge waves. To them, it's actually extremely fun because it's become a part of their lifestyle. It's become a habit. Whereas if you're new and you're trying to do something like that the first time, it seems terrifying. And approaching women at first is going to be really difficult. You're probably going to be choppy. You're probably going to be half-assed. But over time, it becomes more and more exciting instead of anxiety-provoking. And that's something that only happens if you're willing to do more than just dabble. That what you've been doing just isn't enough if you haven't been getting into a flow state. And that's not going to happen every time you go out. It's not necessarily going to happen this weekend, but you should at least feel like you're moving in that direction where over time, as you're going out or over the course of a night, the approaches are starting to get easier, where you're starting to get more into a flow state. Because it's not black or white, it's something you move into gradually. But the real key is to accept and embrace that the only way to get into a flow state when you're not in one is to do the approaches you don't want to do, is to push yourself and lean in to that feeling of resistance. And at first, this is extremely difficult, but funny enough, over time, it will actually start to become something you look forward to, that you almost get, I don't know if I'd call it masochistic or perverse, but you get this very unusual joy out of doing things that push yourself, where you're taking social risks. And while at first, maybe 90% of the time where you're out, it feels stressful more than enjoyable, over time, that'll flip. And it'll be 90% enjoyable and only 10% stressful. But getting there requires some level of commitment with yourself to go out consistently and to push yourself each time to do a little bit more than you did before.